All right. Allison?
Perfect. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today for cyber insurance, how it works, and why you need it. Today, we just wanted to go over a little bit about what is cyber insurance, what it's covering, what's triggering those coverages, what the current cyber insurance market looks like, kind of the cost, how it's trending, what's going on in the cyber insurance marketplace, and then as well as how to better prepare if you are a current purchaser of cyber insurance, how can we better prepare for that upcoming renewal? And then we'll leave some time at the end for question and answer. So if you have any burning questions that come up throughout the PowerPoint, feel free to drop them in the chat box and we'll get to them at the end. My name is Allison Benney. I work at Gallagher, which is a global insurance brokerage firm. I'm here in the St. Louis office, and I'm joined today by Thomas Douglas as well as Brad Butler. Thomas and Brad, you guys want to say hi?
Brad, you can go first.
Sure. My name is Brad Butler. I'm the co-founder and chief technology officer here at Acropolis Technology Group. We've been working with Gallagher for a while now for our cyber insurance and our needs, and we thought that we could really bring some value to our clients by, introducing you to them. So.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Thomas Douglas. I'm with Gallagher here in St. Louis as well. I'm a regional director for network security and privacy practice. By the color of my beard, I think you can see I've been in the insurance business for a while. And for the far majority of it, I've been working on technology risks and information risks of clients. It's been around for about 20 years, really in a more robust space. And my goal today is to help you guys understand that things are still changing in this area. It's still a very active exposure and getting, honestly more challenging all the time. So I'm going to kick off the conversation today, really kind of talking about that background a little bit, because as we started talking about what we call cyber liability insurance, back in 2002, right after California passed its first law, it was perceived that the product was focused on electronic retailers, companies that were doing the business over the internet, because that's where cyberspace existed. And so there was a good handful of companies that needed the insurance, required it as a component of their risk treatment process for their exposures. But really that shouldn't have been the only folks that were looking at buying the coverage and talking about the risk. As we've gone on through the years and more states have adopted more laws outside of just California, we crossed all 50 states only about 3 years ago. But as we had all these states come on, we started to get a better understanding as to where this risk really is. It's not just purely about information, which is payment card information, PCI, personal health information, PHI, or personally identifiable information, or PII, because a lot of companies don't have a lot of that either. And so it was easy for many years to also say, that's not a risk exposure that I as an organization have. Where we are today is this slide right here, which is ransomware. This is the issue that we're facing today. And it really has come to this point for all organizations, in my opinion, that need to be aware that their technology infrastructure that runs their business, that collects their emails, that processes their orders, that communicates with their clients, that communicates internally, that runs their point of sale systems all the way through running their manufacturing processes, things of this nature. All these companies have a technology that can be accessed by third parties and then locked up. So over these 20 years, I may have been talking to a lot of different companies who've said, no, that can't happen to me, and no, that's not my exposure. This is something that is ubiquitous across any information set, any company type, and this list of organizations, these industry verticals here, support that. Whether you're as simple as an automotive company, you're a bank, you're a financial institution, you're a healthcare system, you're a government agency. I mean, I can just kind of keep listing on the type of companies that have some kind of attribute of information, technology, infrastructure that runs their companies. And what happens is all these companies are accessible basically by the bad actors that are out there. It's organized crime, to be honest with you, and organized crime that's harbored in countries we do not have extradition, relationships with here in the United States. And so they kind of look at it as a Robin Hood kind of situation. We're going to go against those capitalists over the United States. We're going to ransom money out of them. And then we're going to, honestly, they're going to employ lots of folks in third world countries, give them technical skills, managerial skills, as they run teams that are out there actively looking for zero-day events, looking for technology infrastructures, and trying to access those companies so that they can lock them up and ransom money out of them. It's not terribly complicated. They're criminals, and so they take the path of least resistance. And that means that they're looking for companies that aren't paying a lot of attention to their technology infrastructure. They're not following through on some of the things that they should be doing on a regular basis, just because either there's a manpower resources issue, whatever it is. And so what we're really talking about isn't necessarily cyber from the standpoint of doing business over the internet. What we're really talking about is your network security and privacy violations. So keeping information private and confidential on your network, that whether it's PII, PHI, PCI, but any other kind of information that your organization has on its purchasing, on its its supplier relationships, on its processing, how does it do any of its business. So really it's every firm really needs this. Every firm needs to be thinking about this and looking at it in two different ways is the way that we're looking at it. One is through an insurance product, but also through actions that can be taken at your organization to make you a better risk for all the insurers. Average costs. This is a fun slide because it's got big numbers on there, but really what I want you all to take away a couple of things. One is if you do go Google, ransomware costs or costs of a breach, you're going to find a whole host of organizations that are providing surveys, reviews, white papers on the subject, and they're all right. They're all right because they're working with the sample information that they have, that they're working with, and sometimes it's a pool of information that's on small, medium enterprise businesses, and sometimes it's larger organizations, and so the numbers will fluctuate a bit. But don't get distracted in that. What I would encourage you to really look at is that the things like this first bullet point. The studies show that the numbers are increasing. You're going to see that across the board in all of them. If you go to Chubb or Travelers, major insurers in the network security and privacy area, you're going to see that their white papers show their study on their clients and their claims. That means that their losses are growing. There's claims that occur that don't get reported to the Missouri Attorney General, for example, because there was no personally identifiable information. We didn't meet the statutory requirements for reporting. They didn't violate the Federal Trade Commission's laws and rules, and so we don't have to report to them. But we did have a breach in our network, and we still had to remediate it, and that cost us a lot of money. We still had a ransom event, and that cost us an inordinate amount of money. And so the Chubb's data set reflects what they see. Travelers is theirs, ours is here. The second bullet is pretty telling. You're going to see a lot on this, which is remote workforces. As we've gone through this pandemic and we're now engaged in a more flexible work environment, things are changing. That's affecting the quality of these claims, because as we're more separated as organizations physically, we don't get some of the common engagements that we were used to, which is having a water cooler conversation, or while someone's getting a cup of coffee, hey, how's things going? So for our network operations team and security operations teams, they may be seeing things individually, but they're not correlating those together and talking about them in a group environment because they're operating remotely. And so we're seeing larger losses in more flexible, hybridized workplace environments. My company is a good example of that. So another item that's interesting in here is lost business. When we talk about ransoms and ransom events, we talk about that payment. Net diligence, for example, says that the average payment is around $250,000, which is up about 100% from last year, which was $125,000. But that's the net diligence sample of ransom events. I know of larger numbers. For example, some of the major insurers have had ransom events. CNA had a well-publicized one. They paid $17 million is the word on that ransom, but they're a very large firm. But the other issue is, what are the costs? We have to factor in the reputational damage that occurred to your firm if we can't handle this event. The inability to support your current customers, fulfill any projects that you have going on for a prospect or future client that you're saying, hey, let me send you some samples. We do it in a really fast, really good service model kind of way. And we may not get that deal, and we may lose other deals that we have that we're currently operating on. That's a big component of these losses. Business email compromise, we're going to talk about some of the factors and ways that folks get into there, but when those occur, those tend to be some of the largest losses. And so when talking about your business email, making sure that it is confidential and private, and you have all the issues with Microsoft 365 address, things like this, that's a big area of concern for our insurers that we talk to on a regular basis. Back to the workforce, being remote, it takes longer to identify that there is a problem in the way that your network is being accessed and used, because now our employees are more flexible. So some folks enjoy working from 8 p.m. until midnight maybe, and they want to get up a little bit later in the morning. Well, that used to be a red flag. Why is Sally accessing the network late at night? Well, has to get written out of your scripts as far as being a problem situation, because we can't collect that data, because then we'd have problems all the time with this remote workforce. So it's taking longer. It's taking a lot longer to identify that somebody's accessing the network that shouldn't be. And really, the answer to a lot of things above is automated intelligence as it relates to your security. Who's looking at this information and analyzing the significant amount of logs and actions that are occurring to bring forth the problem sets where you need to have actual eyes on your situation, saying, this is not normal. This is an anomaly type action. And how quickly can you make that determination with the hybridized remote workforces that we have now? Faster identification, faster containment always is going to be helping you, whether it's today, whether it's your breach response, getting that enabled and mitigating the size and scope of the event. These costs are just getting bigger. It's getting more problematic. Well, where are all those costs really going? It's easy to say ransomware is a payment. It's easy to say that, business income and the loss of clients and loss of revenue. Okay, I can identify those things. But there's a whole host of things that you're going to do during an event, ranging in these 4 buckets here: detection and escalation, being able to identify and escalate and begin to triage the problem with the appropriate folks. That is the first major challenge. You're probably thinking every day, every Monday, somebody's forgot their password, right? Well, that's not a problem. But if it's like the 5th time this person's called in saying that I can't get my password to work, when do you start to escalate that and say, we've got a pattern here that doesn't match what it is that we should be considering as normal errors of users that are on the network? Once we have identified that this is a problem, it's been escalated, we've got our incident response plan in action, 80% of your costs of an event, in our opinion, that's insured, comes out of forensic and investigative activities. Working through the complexity of your technology infrastructure, going from laptop to server, to all the different components that make up your network, working into the software as a service, software as a platform, software as an infrastructure type enterprises that we're outsourcing bigger chunks of our technology. How do you go through all those different access points and say, here's where the bad actors went, here's what they did, here's what they saw when they were there? It's becoming more and more expensive to do those things. And so much of the money says, okay, we get in there, identify what occurred, and remediate the action. That's where a lot of the money is spent. But we can't forget notification and communication issues. As we start to identify where these challenges are and what it is that has happened, how do we share that information within our organization so that we can correctly articulate to our stakeholders what has occurred? You don't want to tell your CEO that the system's fried and we're going to have to buy a whole new computer program and all these different things when that's really not the case. You also don't want to convey to your customers that nothing's happened and they don't need to worry when really something has happened and the integrity of the organization's on the line. They're hiring you to be their vendor, their customer, or your vendor. there in those situations and you want to be able to communicate that you're having an issue, please bear with us and here's what's going on. You got to say it correctly. Other things like educating your employees on if there's downtime associated with an event like this. You can't post on social media that your monitors are blank and there's a problem here at the company. There's all sorts of different individuals that we have to get with and coordinate the communication in a standard and managed way so that when we do want to say something, we say it correctly and we say it timely. Because that'll affect the lost business. You know, when somebody says, hey, I understand that you're having a challenge, we'll be patient as long as you're telling us what's going on and keeping us in the loop. That's the biggest issue that goes on in that lost business side of things. And then post-breach response, we have fines, we have penalties, we have all sorts of different challenges that'll occur and resonate through this process. It sounds like a lot, and it kind of is. There's a lot of actions that go on here, but here's where the insurance comes into play in the biggest way. The carriers have been through these events, they've been through these losses, and they've seen them unfold in all sorts of ways. They've seen vendors like an Acropolis that have come out and had a great job in an event, and they've seen other vendors that have come out and done a very poor job, whether they're too expensive or they don't understand what their obligation is during that event. So the carriers know who the good vendors are for forensics, for breach coaching, for PR, and they bring these folks together for you so that you can take a 10-week event and maybe make it 10 days. Still painful, still a problem, just not as bad of a problem as it could be. And I mentioned something there called the breach coach. This is a very important person that has developed in the legal community over the past probably about 10 or so years. Someone who can provide legal advice on a global basis, or depending on your needs, obviously. But if you have exposure in Canada and the United Kingdom and here in the United States, we have the 50 state laws, we have federal laws, we have Canadian law, we have GDPR coming out of Europe. We have a lot of different laws that we have to comply with, and we have a lot of different obligations within each of those. So who's done that before and who can give me legal advice during that time and then help me manage through the process, get the vendor contracts signed and organized, and then make sure that people are doing what they should be doing. It's called a breach coach. They're invaluable during these events. I feel bad for these attorneys because they're pretty much on 24/7 when they get a call at a client at 5 in the evening, they got to take that call. When it's Thanksgiving Day, they're helping their clients through those problems because that's why they get paid. And so they're very valuable, and they can help you manage all of the items that are on this page so that you keep moving forward, remediating the event, getting it done, and doing it the best way possible. It's the biggest advantage in these events is that the insurance is already structured in a way to provide consultants to support your firm during. So when we talk about the events, the first thing is how do they get in? And Coveware's got some good statistics here, some good information for us to really look at. Depending on your size of firm, there's different ways that they get in, and it can be as simple as phishing. An email that comes to 5 out of your 10 employees, if that's your size, it says, hey, here's a new RFP for the business that you're in. Somebody's going to click on it, and that's the easiest way to gain access. As we go up the size, we start to see some other things come into play, like software vulnerabilities, and that's really a patch management issue. So patch management becomes a thing of, okay, are you paying attention to Microsoft Tuesday? If you get an email about whatever it may be, that's the current, problem du jour, are you in there actively remediating with a patch to help prevent today? But then you see these RDP, this remote desktop compromises. A lot of our software, a lot of our infrastructure has open ports that are available. And this is where also those crime syndicates that are out there use their botnets to just find open ports. They access your desktops remotely, and then they begin to work. I mentioned on a slide ago that there's a challenge associated with identifying that there's an event and remediating the event, right? Over 280 plus days in a remote, flexible workplace environment. Well, the reason is it used to be as simple as kind of thinking, hey, we're just going to, take some money and do some things. But really, they're trying to operate within your network without being seen. And so they quietly and cautiously use these activities that are on the right to go laterally, horizontally, vertically, pick a description for movement as you like, but they're trying to get higher and higher level administrator access and more control over your network. Eventually, when they decide to strike, it's because they finally figured out everything that they need to know about how to extort the most amount of money from you. The extortion, the ransomware, is ultimately what organized crime does, because it's the maximum punch, if you will, for their action. But there's all sorts of different things that they can do, and this is what makes technology kind of amazing and frustrating all at the same time. When they're in your technology, what could they do? Computer fraud. Basically, they can redirect your FedEx packages. They collect all of your inbound mail for a while. They can change your invoicing system so that it has a different bank account number on it. We call that invoice manipulation. They can do things like unauthorized access to the information, which is your information that you're keeping on your clients, for your clients to perform your professional work that you may be doing if you're a professional service firm. Well, you may have an errors and omissions risk there because you violated a contract with a client. Blackmail, extortion, that's ransomware, right? That's just paying a ransom and having to deal with it. Alteration to your system. If somebody came and busted out all the windows at your facility, you'd call that vandalism. If somebody came and changed all your ones to zeros on your network, we call that alteration or vandalism. I mean, it's a lot of different ways to kind of consider it, but that can be either your E&O insurance or potentially even your property policy in some situations. Divulging information, pilfering electronic information, that's back to our ransomware, our cyber policies. So the actions that your technology takes on behalf of your firm are the same actions that those bad actors can use against you. And that's the problem. So insurance can play a lot of different roles in this, but for the purposes of this presentation, we're talking about cyber insurance and the way that cyber insurance can be structured and built to support your organization to help you through one of those terrible incidents. So I'm going to turn it over to Allison, who's going to talk a little bit about an insurance product and the insuring agreements and those kind of things.
So thanks for kind of going over those different things that would policy or costs that were involved. When we talk about what the policy needs to do to respond and why they're structured the way they are, I kind of wanted to go through what some of those buckets we talk about are. And this is just very normal for currently purchasing cyber insurance, things that you would want to talk to your broker to make sure that they have included in your policy right now. You don't want to be paying for a cyber insurance policy that has no coverage, and then an event happens and they're like, yep, sorry, couldn't help you. So when we talk about why we need cyber insurance and what the triggers of the coverage are, we have three different buckets. So we have the third party liability. So if you get into a lawsuit because someone was wronged because their information was taken from your system, that's the third party coverage there, right? It's happening to someone else, and that's why, third party, not internally as a first party situation. Then we have the first party coverages like Thomas talked about. So notification, the cost for notifying everyone that was involved, the cost of credit monitoring, those types of things that are internal costs, the first party cost, and then as well as the first party operational costs. So one of the big things Thomas mentioned earlier was the business interruption. So if your system has a ransomware event and you can't operate on your system for 2 days, 2 weeks, whatever that timeline is, what is that looking like in terms of the income that you are losing as a business? And we need to make sure that that can be covered under the cyber insurance policy. And why this is all important is that if you think back to the economics of insurance companies need to have the money to pay out the claims that happen. So they have to look at these buckets and make sure that they're charging realistically for the claims and when they're happening, and know where those charges are coming from, if we can talk about it like that. So we have to think of it, like I said, three different buckets: the third party response, the first party operational, and then the first party internal response, or the first party internal costs. Thomas, we want to go ahead to the next slide. And so when we talk about to our clients here at Gallagher, we always are bringing up cyber insurance and why we're buying cyber insurance. And the first question they ask is, well, how much should I buy? And historically, if we look back 10 years ago, cyber insurance was endorsed onto a general liability policy for a $25,000 sublimit, which now, when we heard Thomas's statistic earlier about average cyber event being $4.2 million, a $25,000 sublimit seems wimpy or lousy, right? So we're constantly talking to our clients about what that right limit that we need to be purchasing is. And it can't just be because someone told you to purchase it. And if you're a buyer of cyber insurance and you have to go to a board of directors and say, this is what I was purchasing and why, we want to give you those answers and the justification to make you feel confident in that decision that you're making. So the visuals on the screen are all from Gallagher Drive, which is a Gallagher proprietary product where we can help benchmark different limits, the cost of loss that's happening, different retention levels, all when it comes to cyber insurance. And we do that against Gallagher's book of business. So all of our clients that are buying cyber insurance, as well as the data from our carrier partners, like Thomas mentioned, Chubb, Travelers, those types of people, they all have their own claim data. And then we can kind of aggregate different claims data, not down to the pinpoint of who exactly it was, but a general aggregate to help our clients understand why they're purchasing and what the right and correct levels of insurance should be. No one wants to be insurance rich and have all of these limits that they're never going to use. But in the situation that event doesn't occur, you want to have enough coverage. So up there in the top left, this is one of the graphs that we turn to very often when it comes to talking about this conversation, is what are the peers in my industry buying when it comes to cyber insurance? So we often look at, let's say take a manufacturer, for instance, a manufacturer with X amount of revenue, we're able to find 200 of their peers and then benchmark the limits that they're buying. So anywhere between 5 and 6.5, you can kind of see there as the average limit. Then we take, what our peers are buying, and we look at what the average cost of a ransom is in that same industry. So manufacturers and historically who have been targeted by ransomware events, what were those ransoms like? And I'm sure you've kind of gotten this from everything that we've talked about so far, but ransom is one part of the cost that's going to come into the whole claim cost. But obviously it's going to kind of start driving that whole total payout. So you can see in the bottom left, then we're tracking what a traditional ransomware event would look like for a manufacturer, if we can even call that traditional, but historically what's been happening. And then we also can talk about what the retention level is, right? So obviously insurance has to be budgeted and there's a cost, and everyone needs to determine how much insurance to buy, but also keep it at a cost that makes, a reasonable justification for your annual budget. So some ways that we can manage the budget is by taking on a more higher retention or a lower retention. So if you are looking to decrease the total cost of the cyber insurance, we can take a higher retention and be able to kind of offset. And what that means is the retention is the company, what you would pay out as the insured before the insurance pays the claimed total cost. So in the top right there, you can kind of see, we can also graph what a retention level looks like. And that just helps our clients know a better idea of what their peers are buying. What is everyone else doing? Am I the anomaly here, or am I on track with everyone else? Just gives a little more confidence to the decision-making process. And then, like I said, overall, just looking at the traditional workplace that we used to be in, prior to COVID. Now we're in more of an agile workplace or a remote workforce. How has that changed the landscape of cyber insurance? And we can look at that through Gallagher Drive as well. All very useful things you kind of have to take into consideration when it comes to the decision-making process around buying cyber insurance. But we're trying to back up those decisions with as much data and analytics as we can here at Gallagher to help make informed and confident decisions.
Perfect. Because as we talk about the limits, the purchasing and things like this, underwriters are now asking much more specific questions. There was a time about 5 years ago where all I needed was an SIC code, your business, basically your industry in general, your top line revenues and a rounded number and number of employees, and I could get you a quote very simply, very easily. because we weren't having the dramatic amount of claims that we're talking about. The averages weren't reaching the size that they are. The medians weren't as prevalent. But as you saw on our slides, the numbers just keep increasing. And for underwriters that try to predict the future by looking at the past, it's very confusing for them because they don't think things should be trending as poorly as they are. With that mindset, they don't charge enough in premium. And if they don't charge enough in premium and their losses start to mount, we start to get very, very aggressive underwriting restrictions, very aggressive price needs, very large retentions. And that's actually where we are in this insurance marketplace right now for cyber. The severity, the frequency is driving underwriters to really examine what it is that's going on in their books of business. For a while, they were trying to identify that the size of your business, your industry, and maybe even the amount of records that you have, right? That mentality of records being the exposure, trying to come up with some kind of determining factor as to whether that was going to create an ability for them to rate into the future accurately, but that did not work. So they've had to back into larger, deeper, more complicated applications and question sets. It's because underwriters are looking for commonalities of issues and trying to say that if this issue occurs at this organization, then that is going to proceed to some kind of frequency, potentially severity type situation. So they're asking really straightforward questions. And we're going to get to those in a moment. But, you know, the underwriters, they're finance folks. You know, if you had an underwriter on the phone and they have 5 years of underwriting experience in technology, cyber liability insurance, they're going to be able to ask a lot of the current day questions, but really they don't fully understand everything that's going on at your technology infrastructure. And that's where Allison and I and Acropolis come into play. We have to bridge that kind of conversation gap. We have to say, okay, I know they're asking this question. This is what they really mean. And by the way, when you answer this question, did you really mean that? Because these applications have nothing but yeses and nos, and it's never always, and it's always never. There's some medium in there, and then we have to kind of help coordinate the conversation so that the underwriters can say, we know what our risk is, we know what we're getting into. And then you as an organization can recognize that there's a risk management kind of application that's being provided to us here, this roadmap here to making sure that we're doing some of the standard stuff. Because it's hard to sit down and say, I want to spend a lot of money on my technology again this year, even more than last year. But frankly, it's really needed. So the rates are up. Some of my clients have seen 100+% rate increases. Some of my clients have seen 50% rate increases. Even for my clients that have received those very large premium impacts, if they paid $25,000 last year, and I'm asking to pay $50,000 this year, they're also asking if they can buy more insurance, even at these higher rates, because they're recognizing that the risk is just so much greater than it used to be. So if you don't buy insurance, really encourage you to consider it. If you buy $1 million, think about 2, maybe 3 at renewal this year, because it's the equity of the organization that's at risk here. And if we can have the indemnity available out of the insurance, and by the way, rising premium increases means that carriers are paying claims. This isn't a policy that is a, you know, kind of a made up kind of exposure product, and we're just kind of slinging something to get you to pay some premiums here. Now, this is paying lots of claims. That's why the premium's going up so much. So it is a valuable product. It is meaningful, and we can help you understand what it is that you should be buying and how to look at it. But here are the things that you need to be thinking about. This is what you need to be talking about 5-6 months in advance of your renewal. And every carrier has not only an application, and I would encourage you not to fill out a renewal application, which asks questions like, has anything changed since last year, yes or no? Even if you say yes, you have to explain it. And if you say no, I don't know if that's the right answer, because my guess is that you probably have enhanced your technology maturity, your cybersecurity maturity since then. So ask for a main form application, or a new business application, get all the questions so that you can answer very specifically. Because if your broker comes back with the product that says, hey, we're going to go up 300% premium, and you ask them, did you go out to the market? They're going to say, well, we didn't have the answers to do that. You kind of need to know that you need to be providing all the information early on in the process so we can get a lot of carrier responses. The carrier responses right now, they're getting lots of submissions from their clients, whether it's a renewal submission or being asked to quote on a new piece of business, trying to replace another insurer. We're happy to do those things. We're happy to take you out to market, as we call it. But the challenge is if we don't have the information, the new carriers aren't going to quote because they have lots of different submissions on their desk. So what differentiates you? You've got to have your answers. So multi-factor authentication for any kind of access, whether it's admin or remote, any kind of information, any kind of access to your technology, there we go, needs to have MFA assigned to it. If you don't, carriers aren't going to offer you terms, or they're going to cut their limits on your business. Multi-factor authentication has been found to be not the only answer or the panacea to ransomware, but they see that specifically it materially changes the size of the event and also localizes some events. So even if they do get in, bad actors, being phishing still gets around some of those things, they're not able to move laterally through all of your technology. And it's quicker to identify that somebody is asking for permission to look at something that they shouldn't be looking at. Endpoint detection. Yeah, we need to be knowing what's going on all of our endpoints, whether you own all your phones, own all your laptops. You need to have some kind of endpoint protection that is deployed throughout your network, whether it's a straight up and down standard software that's just providing a dashboard, or whether it's all the way through a complete type program where there's NOC and SOC type capabilities associated with it. You need to be doing something on endpoint and understanding that this is going to be helping your organization from that automated information, kind of the AI, if you will, kind of super scripting type situations, be able to identify activities of individual devices before they're doing things into more devices. You want to see those fact patterns quickly and earlier and easier. Phishing exercise simulations. I put that out there, but really it's employee education. Sometimes I put on the screen, I could have done it this time, but you put on the screen a picture, it's a boxing ring, and in one corner you've got IT and all of the racks and servers and computers, and everybody's looking at things. In the other corner you've got Bob, and he's got his laptop and he wants to click on this picture of something that has come across his email. Employees need to know that when they're operating on your network, that is not their right. I mean, there's some extent that you want to let some people do some personal things during work hours, but the email systems, the technology infrastructure, that is yours, and it protects your company and your customers' actions, and it's your reputation and brand damage. And so letting employees know and doing these simulations and doing the training, it's very important, because those employees, all they got to do is open the door. Kind of think of it as the proverbial castle, and somebody comes and knocks on the locked door, and all you got to do is open it, and in they come. It's that same kind of mentality. So you got to train them. Train your employees. Don't click on things. Don't open things unless you need to. Patch management. This might sound pretty simple, but it's not anymore. There's so many different technology assets that are used in your business. Making sure that you have the most up-to-date patches or is everything. I mean, even Apple, who's construed to be a stalwart as relates to its operating systems and keeping malware off of their phones and their computers, they had an emergency patch that came out a couple of weeks ago, and that was because there was a vulnerability found, and that's just the case of things. If you think about Microsoft and its Exchange 365 event from a couple of months ago, that was a big problem, and some companies said, yeah, we're going to get to that, and that's just not acceptable to underwriters. You're not allowed to say that we're driving our truck because the seatbelt doesn't work and we've got 2 flat tires. They expect you to be taking care of your technology and keeping it up to date. So there's an idea, though, that the policies have an exclusion in them, that if you don't keep your technology up to date, they're going to exclude coverage. That's generally not the case. But what they're doing is they're saying, we're not going to offer you coverage if you're not keeping your systems updated and your technology infrastructure patched and ready to go. Backups. Ransomware is about locking up your system, right? And I think Acropolis and Brad is going to speak about this here in just a little bit, but You have to be prepared that someday you may get locked up, and what are you going to do? Hopefully you have a backup process and protocol that you've tested, you've gone through once or twice, and those backups are available to you. Yes, you're going to lose some hours, 6, maybe 12, maybe 24, but that's not nearly as expensive as having to pay somebody $1 million ransom and then hoping that they're going to give you the key. Generally, they do. Maybe it's a kind of a pirate kind of mentality that, yes, we're going to steal from you, but we're going to tell you the truth, that we'll give you the code afterwards, and you got to trust that that's going to be the case. But you don't want to go through that. It's better to have your backups, get your systems organized, get back up and running, get back to work. And maybe you have to redo a day's worth of work. That's not as bad. And having those backups and having an incident response plan and a business continuity plan that has cyber-related events, that's important as well. ICP and BCP, as we kind of call it, as the acronyms, are not that complicated to put together. It's just an organization, and it's time and it's administrative effort to come through and say, we're going to get organized in advance of a situation, then run a tabletop or two. If you've done all these things, you'll start to be able to answer these questions on applications much more simply and easily. It's a matter of having a maturity at your cybersecurity kind of mindset that we need to be prepared for the when, not the if. I used to get chided by some of my other producers and folks here in the business world who are saying, it's going to happen someday. Somebody's going to get into your network and they're going to operate on it and they're going to take advantage of you. And I felt like we were being, I was being kind of mean or something like this to the quality of the teams that are supporting your organizations. And I don't mean to be, and nobody does, but it's just the fact of the matter that this may very well happen in the near future. You just got to be prepared for it so that when you have the event, it's not as bad as it could have been. I'm going to turn it over to Brad. I kind of referred to him once or twice in this presentation because it takes everybody on board as we look at these events, and he's got some stuff that's important to say here too.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Looking at the list of the baseline ransomware controls, if you've been an Acropolis client for a long time, you know that our strategic advisors have been out. They've been talking to you about, the phishing simulations and how important it is to train your end users and make them aware of the bad guys and how they want to attack, the person in the seat. We're the weakest link. As we went through and we look at patch management and, some of these other technologies, the bad guys, they're not really hacking in that much from the outside, trying to get through your firewall. They're sending your end users emails and having them open the gate, for them so that then they can come in. And then once they're in, that's how they move laterally and move across the network. At Acropolis, we've recently just updated our antivirus. We provide that to a lot of our clients, and we've moved it to an endpoint detection and response platform. So now we have software out there that's AI based that can detect those anomalies and alert us so that we can really bring down that the time from when the bad guy gets in to when we notice the bad guy gets in. We can really shorten that timeline. And we've had clients where it's been as quick as an hour. The bad guy got in, he started to do some stuff. We got notified and we were able to lock him down before he could move laterally across the network and roll out his tools so that he could delete the backups and then install the ransomware. So the endpoint detection response is really a very powerful tool in our toolbox to protect our clients. Patch management, we've been doing that for years. The encrypted and segmented backups, again, our strategic advisors have been talking to you, our clients and prospective clients and people like that. That's a service that we offer where it's more about when you design your backup solution, it needs to be hardened and separate from your existing network, because the bad guys, they know you have a backup. So they're going to get in, and we've seen this. They'll get in, they'll delete the backup, if they can get access to those credentials and then they encrypt the network for maximum damage. So we have our Image Vault platform that does that and really takes care of that for you. And then multi-factor authentication. This is something that we've been rolling out to clients for the last year or so, starting with just your Office 365 and making sure you have multi-factor authentication turned on to access your email and those assets that are in the cloud. But now it's migrating more to actually using that two-factor authentication to access your desktop. We had a client who hired an outside security company to come in and do a penetration test and do a vulnerability assessment. And at the end of it, the third-party security company came back and said, "You guys are in great shape. The hardest thing we had to overcome was the two-factor authentication when we wanted to move across the network laterally." That's not something that they list as a security baseline, but I highly recommend it. Hire a third party. Acropolis, we don't do that. If we manage the network, we want to have that third party come in and take a look and see, aspects that we might, that might have been missed, or that might have, as you implemented a new technology, that it may have opened a vulnerability that we may not have seen. So that's one thing that we really recommend doing also, is that third party assessment. And then in the event that you do have a breach, heaven forbid that happens, Acropolis has worked with many insurance companies, and we kind of understand the forensic needs that they need. We're going to want to get you up and running as quickly as possible. But a lot of times to do that, that means we have to reformat a computer or restore from backup. And when we do that, that really erases a lot of the forensic evidence that the insurance companies need and that the forensic team needs to figure out, hey, what all did they access? Was there a breach, and did they, pull a PII and send it up to the cloud? So we understand that, and working with the insurance companies and with the providers, we can bring out rescue hardware, and maybe we would restore your business to that rescue hardware so we can keep the forensics clean, for the people to come in and figure out what was actually breached, and, did they exfil data outside your network that turns it into a much larger issue than it would be if it was just a simple ransomware. For our new clients that we're bringing on, we have all of these solutions kind of baked into a single offering that we can offer you, or that we have offered you. For our legacy clients that might be out there, some of these might be add-on services or a la carte services that you may want to add on, so that the next time you have to fill out that cyber liability insurance form, you can tick all the boxes yes, and really get a better rate and hopefully get the coverage that you need that way. So that's all I have, Tom.
Yeah.
And then if there's any questions,
It's-
please
it's,
shoot them up into the chat.
Yep. All right. Allison?
Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. Everything that Brad mentioned is exactly what we're talking to our clients about. How do we highlight the things that you're doing with Acropolis, with, internally with IT? What are you doing that we can highlight besides just checking that yes in the application to make your submission go to the top of the underwriter's stack of submissions they're looking at that day? And like Brad said, get the best rate, get the best pricing, and even the availability to get the insurance and the amounts that you want. Another thing here, for anyone on the call today, Thomas and I are giving out a code to Gallagher's Erisk Hub, which is something all of our clients have access to. And it's full of just new information, whatever's new and coming out about cyber insurance. It's on there. There's privacy trainings, tools to help you educate your employees. Anything that can help you become a better educated buyer of cyber insurance is going to help you through that renewal process and ultimately help you get the best renewal. And so this tool is a great takeaway for everyone on the call today. We'll send it out as well after the meeting with the slide deck, so you have the code and everything you need to get on, but it's a great tool to have in your back pocket. And then lastly, Gallagher hosts a variety of cyber webinar education seminars. Here's one coming up. If you go onto that link, you can sign up. You can either join live, or if you sign up for the link, they'll send you the recording afterwards. They're all about what is going on in the insurance marketplace. Like Thomas mentioned, the last 12 months, a lot has changed in the cyber marketplace. And whether we're talking about multi-factor authentication, whether we're talking about the infrastructure that you need to maintain and evolve as you go on as an organization and you grow, all of those are discussed in this webinar series. So definitely go on the link if you're interested. Great content. The cyber experts at Gallagher are second to none, so great to hear from them.
Right. So that concludes the presentation, but Maria or Brad, you guys looking at the chat to see if there's any questions that might have come up, or if there's any from the group that want to bring them up now?
We have a couple. One from Troy. Does Gallagher have any advantage in placing cyber insurance?
I can
Allison,
take
do you want to grab that?
Short,
You want
yeah.
to take it?
Short answer, absolutely. The little bit lengthy answer here is yes. Being the third largest broker in the world, we have the leverage that it takes to get what we need done in the cyber marketplace. So whether that's, getting the capacity that we need and the limits that we want, whether it's the turnaround quicker, whether it's the rates in themselves and whatever the quote is going to look like in the final life stage, all of that, our size and leverage helps because we're placing more cyber insurance than most brokers out there. So definitely that, as well as we've created our own proprietary systems where we can go on and answer just 4 or 5 questions about an organization and get an instant cyber quote. Works for most industries. There's obviously some few anomalies out there, but being able to at least just see what that cost would be right away is a good budget tool and has worked great for a lot of our clients, as well as, with the leverage we have in the marketplace, we're able to demand, or I guess ask the coverage that we want, and then we're able to get it. So we've created our own proprietary forms, different things that we say, instead of just saying, hey, we want cyber insurance and getting the bare bones back from an underwriter, we're asking for this lengthy list of 150 endorsements, and we're getting them back because we know what to ask for, and we're getting, sending those day in and day out for all of our clients. So short answer, yes.
Perfect.
Okay. The next one is, can Acropolis work with the insurance provider if there's a cyber claim?
Yes, we can. I kind of alluded to that earlier. We've done that many times before. And as we work with companies and help them develop their incident response plan, normally one of the top actions is contact your insurance company, because they do have that breach coach, which is invaluable. We've had clients who haven't done that, and they've really struggled. They got their attorney from Brian Cave involved, and then they got, Brian Cave got somebody else involved, and it was a mismatch of this team that hadn't really worked together before, and it made the process go a lot. In my mind, it took a lot longer than it should have. From where I've seen people, contact their insurance agent first thing, they bring in the team that's a well-oiled machine that has worked together before, and they get it taken care of very quickly. So yes, we can work with the insurance companies when that happens.
Okay, we have another one. Does the cyber insurance product change for different industries? How does a client applicant know which policies or protections are critical, and how long do they have to remediate deficiencies?
Allison, I'll grab that one if that's okay, because you got the first one. So industries are, as far as a risk goes, we kind of talked about it earlier, that having information, having technology assets certainly creates the cyber exposure. Once you go into a couple of different industries, particular technology service providers, if you get into a professional service firm, the question starts to be around what is not only the obligation to keep information private and confidential as it relates to the laws, the regulations that you have to comply with, but also what it is that you promised your customers in your contracts. So we encourage those clients that have contract-related professional services that they provide, consulting, advisory, you kind of pick it. You want to have the E&O insurance and the cyber on the same policy. One, you could buy higher limits and share between the two exposures, so it's theoretically cheaper. Secondarily, if you do have an issue, I should actually make this a primary issue. You want to have a coordination on that claim. You don't want to have two different insurers trying to call the shots with you, because someone may have a different opinion than the other insurer, and all of a sudden you get into a slowdown of fight, kind of what Brad was just talking about a second ago. You want to have the team that's done it together. Secondarily, we can end up with some preferred pricing within these programs. We just had a construction client that's looking to comply with a service that it's providing, a professional service. And we found there is a very specific market that provided a whole host of different covers related to professional services that a construction company offers that included cyber. Now, it provided the liability part, that kind of that bucket that Allison described. It didn't have the other bucket, so we had to supplement it with some other products, but it did provide some really good price efficiencies as it related to the procurement of all the covers for that risk. So yes, we need to explore the market. There's about 100 insurers right now that do cyber liability, and they do it in various ways and various capacities. So having a good broker that can really work through the different marketing and the different opportunities is really can make a material difference in the quality of the outcome of that policy and the pricing. Thank you for that question. That was a good one.
I think that's it.
Well, yeah. Well, if that's it, on behalf of myself and those at Gallagher, thank you very much for your time today. If you think of some questions that may come up, do reach out to us. Again, as Allison said, you'll be getting a copy of the PowerPoint, and our contact information is attached there. Thank you very much for your time. Brad, anything
No, I'd just like to say thanks again for attending. Hopefully it was informational. You kind of learned a little bit on the process and how it works. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to us.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, guys.